Hi, everyone. My name is Stefan Schuster, and welcome to the fourth episode of the Journey Running Podcast. If this is your first time listening, welcome. Once again, I am your host, Ultra Runner, and ultramarathon running coach Stefan Schuster, and today we've got a great episode. I'm going to be talking about a race report for the Mogollon Monster 100-mile endurance run. And I think this is going to be a really great episode because the Mogollon Monster, since its inception about 10 years ago or so, has had multiple different variations of the race course. And as of last year in 2021, Aravaipa decided to change the course to a point-to-point format for the 100-miler. And so because there's only been two editions now, last year and this year, that have taken place on that 100-mile point-to-point course, I think this is going to be a really great episode for people who are running the race in the future. At least I know from my experience preparing for the race this year, there wasn't a whole lot I think there was only like one or two race reports that I could find online outside of like maybe trying to stalk a few people's Strava to see what the course is like, because, as you're training for this race, people just keep telling you how tough it is and how technical the terrain is and how slow of a course it is. And so that makes it a bit intimidating, I think, when you're leading up to it, partially because you want to know how long approximately am I gonna be out there, because you just want to have an idea. I think we all do. But also, I mean, most of us, I think, have crews that we're taking out there, and we want to be able to say, hey, I'll meet you at this mile marker at approximately this time and whatnot. And so I think this is going to be a really useful race report for people who are training for this race in the future. At least I hope it is useful for people in the future. But yeah, without further ado, let's dive right into it. Also, I think this is really cool. You can watch this episode on YouTube um, or on Spotify or Apple Podcasts as of now. I'm working to get this up on Google and a few other platforms as well. But if you do have any outstanding questions at the end of the episode, please feel free to leave them in the comments, or you can even email me at journeyrunningllc@gmail.com. But yeah, my goal for this episode is to really outline the course for people who are going to be running this race. I want to talk about how tough and how technical it actually is. And I mean, yeah, overall, I ended up clocking 101 miles for the entirety of the course. And I clocked 16,500 feet of gain and 18,000 feet of descent approximately. And I have just a Koros Apex here. Lasted me the whole race. I have the basic version. But yeah, technically it's in that downhill course. I ended up finishing in about 27 hours and 12 minutes, which was good for 7th place. So that was pretty cool. If you are running this race, I think that anytime somebody runs a 100-miler under 30 hours, I think that's impressive. But in particular, I think this is a really challenging race. Overall, I love that. I had so much fun on this course. Like, it was super steep in sections. It was super technical. Um, it was, I mean, it was beautiful. Like, overall, just had a great time out on this course, and I would highly recommend signing up for it if you are thinking about it. I'm wearing the race shirt here. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see it. There we go. And then I got the belt buckle here I can show as well. So pretty sweet belt buckle. Can't lie. Really like this one. Um, but yeah, overall, love the train over there. The night before the race, there's a lot of information on this race on the website. I'm going to try to not dive too deep into everything that you guys can already find online. But I did end up I camped out, just car camped the night before the race, about 30, 40 minutes from the start line, and right near like the packet pickup area. That worked pretty well for me. Was able to sleep like 7 hours there, which is the most sleep I've ever gotten before a 100-miler. Which was that was definitely very helpful as you're going into the night, and just don't feel as fatigued. But to start off this race, it starts off really fast. If you're going to this race to compete, then you're going to want to start out in the front, like from the get-go, because this race immediately starts off on pretty fast single track. The first descent's really not too bad. It's pretty I don't know, it's not very technical to start off. The first descent, and then you end up on the rim, super runnable up there. And then the first descent is also going to be the easiest one of the course. So you're not starting off with the most challenging stuff from the get-go. But I would recommend starting off in the front if you are trying to actually go out and like race this course. Um, Yeah, I would say the fun really begins when you get like right after the first aid station, which is Sea Canyon at mile 11, because right after you leave that aid station, that's where you really start to see the ruggedness, the true ruggedness of this race. And so when people talk about how difficult the Mogollon Monster is, they're talking about the steepness of some of the climbs and the descents, but they're also talking about how technical the terrain is and how overgrown it really is on the bottom of the rim. Every single time, essentially, that you're on top of the rim, you're running on like flat dirt Jeep roads, and you can make up a lot of time on those roads. And I would highly recommend making sure you run as much of that stuff as possible. But when you're at Sea Canyon at mile 11, you spend a few miles below the rim there, and it's immediately overgrown. There's a few down trees. Yeah, I mean, this race is really like they describe it as a rugged race on the website, and it's as advertised, quite frankly. The second ascent of the race, I thought that was also relatively smooth. Um, it's funny, this race just starts to get more and more challenging just slowly. So, like, the first ascent wasn't too bad. The second one, also not terrible, but a little bit steeper, a little bit longer. I also remember a few more down trees on that section as well. But yeah, once you get to the top of the rim on that second ascent, that's where it gets really runnable for a few miles, and you can start to cruise and just move well up there. But I think that really where the race starts is that second descent. That second descent's going to be at mile 17, I believe, of the course. Let me double check here. Ba, ba, ba. Yeah, about mile 17 when you're on the way to aid station number 2, Horton Creek. And so when you're going up that climb, when you're going that down that descent, it was actually pretty funny. I saw Jamil there was filming for our Vipa with the drone, and I like you're like running on this like smooth dirt Jeep road, and all of a sudden you get to this point where it becomes rugged single track and it just starts going down. um I remember looking at it and I was just like, whoa. And Jamil looked at me and was like, yeah, it's a doozy. um so it's a pretty steep descent there. If you're interested in seeing what some of this stuff looks like, I also have a YouTube video up that's just called like Mogollon Monster 2022, and you can actually get to see what some of the terrain looks like. Keep in mind, it's kind of difficult to actually capture that stuff when you're in the middle of a race trying to focus on like not falling on your ass. But it's a pretty cool it's a pretty cool section. It's definitely going to be really, really steep there. I would budget a few extra minutes if you're trying to predict like how long something's going to take you. But yeah, that descent's going to be the hardest of the course. It's pretty short, only like a half mile for the really steep stuff, but then it gets super technical. One thing I would recommend if you're training for this race is being proficient with your poles. One thing that I found really helpful was when I was running down that second descent. First, it's super steep, but then it gets runnable, but it's super rocky. So it at least helped me a lot to be able to use one pole on each side to just help me balance as I'm trying to run down this really rocky terrain into that second aid station. And then it's funny because the hardest descent of the race is followed by the hardest ascent of the race. And so that first descent's around like mile 17-ish, I think. And then that third ascent, I can tell you right now, is going to be, let's see, around mile, I think that's around mile like, yeah, 23 to 25-ish. Yeah, that's right. Because once you get to the top of that third ascent, you end up on what's called Black Mesa. And Black Mesa is a crew zone for a few miles, which means that you do get to see your crew on the top of that area. But to get there is definitely challenging to say the least. Once again, it's a really, really steep climb. Um, I mean, I don't know how people did it without poles. I feel like I would have expended a lot more leg energy if I didn't have my poles with me. So I would highly recommend poles once again for this climb in particular. And then, I mean, yeah, it's really steep and it's really overgrown. The only way to really know what it's like is to go and do it. But it's a slow climb. Like those are going to be some slow miles if you're running this race, and it's probably like a mile and a half climb, maybe 2 miles. But yeah, once again, when you get to the top of the rim there, you do get to see your crew. And Black Mesa is really good motivation because, I mean, everybody loves to see their friends, their family after doing something difficult. It's just some great motivation mentally. One thing I'll note about that, though, is whenever you're running a race, just whether it's this one or another one, ultra marathons take place in just remote environments. And so, one thing I always tell people is never base your race plan off of seeing your crew. And what I mean by that is if there's certain gear or food that you need on you to complete a race, make sure that you have it on you. Don't give it to people and expect them to be there because things happen, like flat tires happen, crews get lost, they just miscalculate how much time it's going to get them there. Maybe they realize their car can't get up the road or something, there could be, I don't know, a traffic jam. Usually not in the middle of nowhere. But what I'm saying is, like, just make sure that you're prepared if you're running a race in the middle of nowhere because you want to make sure that you're able to continue. Um, you want to make sure you're able to continue in case, I don't know, maybe your crew gets lost, which my crew actually ended up punching in the wrong directions. You guys could probably tell where I was going with that. They ended up going to the wrong Black Mesa on Google Maps. I guess there's two, so tell your crew to watch out for that. One thing that's nice though is Aravaipa does provide a crew document that actually has QR codes with the Google longitude and latitude spot for your crew to be able to go to. So all your crew really has to do for this race is look up that crew access document and then they can just scan like the QR code, and that QR code will take them on Google Maps to the Black Mesa aid station. How my crew messed that up, I'm sure they're going to listen to this and laugh, but I don't know how they messed that up. But just as a reminder, for this race and for any other race, use your crew as motivation, but don't actually expect to see them if that makes sense to you. Or I hope what I'm saying makes sense. They always say like what can go wrong will go wrong, and oftentimes that is unfortunately true. So when you're making your race plan, just make sure that you have like your extra calories on you, because that's what I ended up having to rely on. Luckily, I had an extra gel with me. That climb up to Black Mesa, it took a while. A little bit longer than I was expecting, and I was hoping to grab a few pieces of food from my crew over there, but wasn't able to do it. On the bright side, there were a lot of other crews there. I'm sure if like I needed something or you need something when you're there, you can get that from other crews. And our Vipa does leave a water jug up on the top of the rim there in case you need to refill, which on a hot day, you're definitely gonna need. On my day actually. It ended up being scattered thunderstorms. And so where I was in the race at that point in time was, so I got up to Black Mesa and it was looking like something might roll in. It was a cloudy day with some T-storms in the forecast. I don't know, the days leading up said first it was like 50% storms and then 20 and then 50 and then 20. So you really didn't know what was going to happen. And so I was running along Black Mesa there thinking to myself, it's looking like it might storm in a second. And next thing you know, you hear thunder. So before I get to that, yeah, just want to say one more time, when you're running a race, don't rely on crew. I always recommend taking about an extra like 500 to 700 calories on you if you can. So a few bars, maybe a gel or two, just to make sure that you're safe. So I ended up eating like just a gel and then continuing along the rim, and it actually ended up in a decently like exposed section. So the third descent of the race there is I don't want to say it's not dangerous like on a nice day, but if there was thunder and lightning, it's definitely like probably one of the worst spots on the course, I would say, to get caught. And so I actually ended up on the rim right as it started pouring on me, and there was I heard like one or two cackles of thunder out there, but I didn't see any lightning. So I actually stopped for a minute to dissect the situation because I knew I had about a quarter mile of running out onto like this, it was like the edge of the mesa before you end up going down the rim. Um, and so I kind of just stopped and looked at the clouds for a minute. It was really weird because there was like pouring rain right in front of me, and then there was uh, blue skies to the right of that and then to the left. So I wasn't really sure what to do for a moment, but luckily didn't look like it was going to be any lightning was coming in, so was able to skedaddle down that section as quickly as possible. Unfortunately, my phone got wet, so I didn't really get to. I couldn't like click on my phone to film that section as much as I wanted to. Otherwise, it would have been cool to get some of that footage. But yeah, I would say that's probably one of the coolest like views on the course. Even though for me, I was more so focused on like safety over there. But really cool section of the course. Um, Also, I would say, yeah, just going down there, got super wet. My shoes got soaked. I ended up having to switch socks out. Um, about, yeah, what was that? Fish hatchery, mile like 32-ish. And so yeah, let's talk about fish hatchery actually, because before the race, one of the things that everybody was talking about, even on like the even on the Mogollon Monster website that they talk about, is the section from mile 32 to 42, which is fish hatchery to Myrtle. And so I would say I would agree that it's probably the longest section of the course in terms of how much time you're going to be alone on one section. It's super rolly, and I mean, in the 30s is really when you start to feel all those ascents and those descents. You're really starting to feel all the day's miles accumulate on your legs. And because that section is 10 miles, and I mean, on a hot day, it could probably be really hot out there. I mean, for me, I had that cloud cover, which was nice, but I would definitely recommend on a hot day, especially if you're a back of the packer, I would highly recommend you carry upwards of 2 liters. I mean, I'm not joking. I rolled into Myrtle at mile 42 on top of that climb, and apparently I was the only person who had not run out of water. And I took 1.5 liters with me, and I didn't drink much of my last bottle, but yeah, I took a just like a third bottle that I put in the back of my pack with me, and yeah, I just had that for safety essentially, because it is a long section. And I just want to say that again, on a hot day, you should definitely consider carrying at least 1.5 liters. I think like I did is safe, and then probably upwards of 2 liters for a lot of people though. But yeah, it's a pretty rolly section, and that's really where you're going to start to feel the miles of the day accumulate. And a lot of people also talk about that climb up to Myrtle being really difficult. I don't think it's not as difficult as a climb as the one up to Black Mesa. The one up to Mesa is very steep and overgrown. The one up to Myrtle is just prolonged. I remember doing a lot of hiking in between the section from Fish Hatchery to Myrtle because it was essentially like that. It's that type of vertical where you don't really want to run it, but you also, when you're walking, you're like, I kind of wish I was going faster. So it's just a slow section because of that. I ended up personally doing a lot of hiking, and I thought that I couldn't believe that I didn't see anybody on that section actually. But what that tells me is that if I was feeling bad on that section, then other people probably were too. Like if somebody didn't catch up to me there, that means that everybody was feeling it there. It's just something that I noticed on that section. But the other thing I want to note here is that this is a really difficult 100-miler, and especially as the miles of the race start to accumulate, how well you can do in a challenging 100 like this really depends on your ability to make a lot of small decisions correctly. And so I spent a lot of time during this race really focusing on just on like the minute details of what it takes to be successful at a 100-miler. And so for me, I stopped in that section. I didn't want to change my socks, but I was like, Stefan, you have to pull over, change your socks, save your feet for later on in this race. So I spent 10 minutes probably changing out my socks. I remember at the aid station at Fish Hatchery before starting that section, I used my own tailwind because uh, I don't really practice with. I forgot what the electrolyte drink that Aerovipa had there. I think it was gnarly, something like that. I thought it started with a G. Anyways, but took the extra time to like use my own concoction of tailwind that I had with me. I took the extra time to fill that extra water bottle, make sure that I ate the correct amount of calories and then had extra for the road. So, this race is as much of a mental roller coaster as it is a physical one, but you have to make sure that you're taking the time out of your race to make those small decisions correctly so that you end up saving time because those decisions add up to allow you to be successful. Um, but yeah, I think that's all the notes I wanted to make on that section. Just make sure you're going into it prepared with the right amount of fluid and food. The main thing that we want to see here is people be safe and make the right decisions so that they don't have a scary experience in any sort of regard because they're not taking the right stuff with them. But yeah, this is also a section where it's time for you to start honing that mental toughness and keep moving forward. This is the section where the race starts to get hard, but it's also the section where you have the opportunity to start building that character in those more difficult situations. And so yeah, lastly, just going to reiterate it one more time. Before this race started, I told myself that success here would depend on my ability to take care of myself, whether I wanted to or not. And I'm going to tell you guys, if you want to do well at this race, it's going to be the same thing for you. If you want to do well at Mogollon or any really difficult, rugged mountain 100-miler, your success is going to be dependent on how well you can take care of yourself. And I know that it takes time to do things like change socks, swap water bottles out of the pack, and like even use your own electrolyte drink. But I don't know, I still finished in 7th. I still finished in 27 hours, which I thought was pretty good. I'm not trying to toot my own horn. I'm just trying to say that you can do well, even if you have to take some time out of your race to make the right decisions. But yeah, keep that in mind. I hope that that's helpful for people. Let's see. So yeah, getting up to fish hatchery. I almost forgot about this. I got up there and I got really lucky because some hail started coming in as I was going along the bottom of the rim. It was actually mentally tough because you could hear thunderstorms all over the top of the Mogollon rim, and you knew that you were going to be running up into them at some point. And the whole time I was on the bottom of the rim, I was thinking to myself, I hope everybody at Black Canyon is safe because the storm that I got down the rim in time and safely, luckily, but it sounded like there was a thunderstorm up at the Black Canyon crew area right after I had rolled through there. And then right as I rolled back up the rim again to fish hatchery, there was like marble-sized hail that was like pounding on me, like right as I rolled into the aid station. So I only had to deal with that for like 30 seconds, but I don't know, it hit for like 5 minutes while I was at the aid station. So I got really lucky. I didn't really get hit by it, but I mean, other people definitely did. And I don't know, it was also tough because you know that they have canceled the race once in the past because of thunderstorms, and unfortunately that decision is going to have to be made to make sure people are safe in the future. So I didn't even know if the race was going to be I thought it might be canceled while I was in the middle of that section, which took me like 2 or 3 hours. But once again, once you get up to fish hatchery, every time you get to the top of the rim, the race becomes a lot more runnable. This is where you guys can make up a lot of time. And whether you want to run or not, that's where you got to force yourself to run if you care about time or not, even if you're just trying to be cutoffs, that's where you make your time and can really move in this race. And so, yeah, Myrtle to Buck Springs was quick. I actually clocked that section like a mile short. I think I clocked it like 3 instead of 4 miles. I think the race made up for it somewhere else because it ended up being a 101-mile race anyway. But yeah, pretty easy section to get to Buck Springs. That's where you can pick up a pacer. I actually ended up picking up my pacer, my friend Joel Gartenberg. If you haven't already, you can hear Joel's interview with the Journey Running podcast in episode 3. So just the episode right before this one, as this is going to come out as episode 4. But yeah, you can definitely, I would definitely recommend listening to Joel's podcast. He had some really interesting things to say, and he really helped me as a pacer become a much better runner and I'd say a better person. We had some great conversations while we were out there. But yeah, I don't know. I rolled into Buck Springs, was able to connect with my crew for the first time since I didn't see them at Black Mesa. For me, it was a little bit painful though, because I did have some knee pain for whatever reason that started hurting in the 30s and the 40s, and then it just randomly went away, which was weird. But I did start having some GI issues around mile 45 to like 53. Um, was that Buck Springs to Pinchot Cabin. So that section is going to be, it's not as easy as like the dirt roads are on top of the rim like they normally are. Like all the miles on top of the rim, like I've been saying, are super fast. Those are a little bit slower because it is more on like I would call it clean single track as opposed to that overgrown rocky single track on the bottom of the rim. But pretty rolly section. It's not fast, but it's not slow, if that makes any sense. I thought I had a little bit of trouble on that section because some stomach issues. I believe that I was hypernatremic just a little bit, or sorry, hyponatremic. I thought I had a little bit too much water throughout my day as opposed to electrolytes. And the way that I was able to tell is by when you're hypernatremic and you have too many electrolytes, your stomach feels very bloated and it's hard to, like, you feel full, so you don't want to drink, but you're also dehydrated because you have too much electrolytes in your stomach. But that's not how I felt. I was still peeing a lot. Maybe that's TMI for some people, but you can tell a lot about your hydration status by urination during the race. And yeah, I could just tell that I had drank a little bit too much water and I needed some more salt. So once I got to Pinchot Cabin, I spent some time eating some ramen. I started drinking some Coke. Uh, Started to get that night caffeine. We got to Pinchot right before nightfall, and I believe I got there in about 12 hours and 10-ish minutes. I spent a little while there. I didn't. It's not fun taking your own advice, but like once again, I told myself before the race, make decisions you don't want to make in order to be successful, if you think they're the right ones. So I changed shoes and socks at Pinchot Cabin. Thought it was a really good aid station to do that because you got to get your night gear on anyway. As hot as this race can be during the day and as rainy as it could be during the day, it can also get really cold at night. So make sure you have some good night gear. And one thing, if you have like a waist belt with a headlamp, also going to be super helpful because it gets really rocky below the rim and in those night sections. So yeah, I stopped for probably like 20-ish minutes over at Pinchot Cabin, and I thought that it ended up being a good investment because we ended up not stopping for more than like 5 to 10 minutes at any other aid stations for the remainder of the race. Um, and yeah, I was able to fix my stomach there. I also thought it was a good investment because of that. Um, let's see. So Pinchot Cabin to Washington Park. It's called Wash Park. I live in Denver. There's a Wash Park. So Wash Park is like at home. I only live like 2 or 3 miles from that park. uh, anyways, yeah, that Pinchot Cabin to Wash Park section was pretty similar to the previous one, like from Buck Springs to Pinchot. Another rolly section, pretty clean single track through the forest, not super technical. Until you get to mile 60. So Pinchot Cabin's at mile 53. So 53 to 60 is going to be pretty smooth sailing, nothing too crazy. But from mile 60 to 62 to that aid station at Wash Park there, you end up going down a descent that's called Powerline. Apparently, Powerline used to be a big climb in that used to be part of the Mogollon course, but you used to go up it, and now you go down it. I didn't think it was too bad. I had I heard that it was a really sketchy section before the race. And I mean, I don't know, there was a lot of loose rock there, but it only lasted for like a half mile. It was a pretty quick section that, I don't know, you just go slower for like a half mile. But after that, it's just like a normal, somewhat runnable descent. But yeah, it's really just that little first section that's tough. Um, I don't know. For me at Wash Park, I really started to get into like a good nighttime groove. Um, for me personally, it worked very well to drink about 3 cups of Coke, just in like those not disposable, but just in like the reusable plastic cups. I think we all have one as ultra runners. You can have so many of those from races, those and buffs. But I would drink like 3 cups of Coke, have 1 cup of ramen, and have 1 cup of coffee, and fill my bottles with like one with water, one with electrolyte, and be on my way. For me, that was like the right amount of caffeine. I never bonked throughout the whole race. I never had any sort of issues being awake and alert. I would highly, highly recommend that if you're running a 100 miler and if you don't already have a caffeine strategy, just like you have a nutrition strategy. When I say nutrition, that's so broad because that means calories, but that also means electrolytes, but that also means fluids. Um, and you could also put caffeine into that spectrum too, though. So make sure you have a caffeine strategy. Know what works for you. If you don't like coffee, then maybe something like if Red Bull's your jam, go for it. But just know what's going to keep you up because I have unfortunately been there when you're climbing a mountain in the middle of the night at 3 a.m. and you're falling asleep while you're climbing up a freaking mountain, and that's not fun. um, so yeah, making sure you dial in your caffeine strategy is something I would definitely recommend if you're trying to improve at your night section, improve on night section running. Um, let's see though. So Wash Park's going to be at mile 62, and then Geronimo, I believe, is at about mile 72. So it's listed on, if you're looking at like a vert chart for the race, that's going to be listed as a downhill, but it's really a super technical section. I believe it's mostly on the Arizona Trail and a little bit on the Highline Trail, I think it's called there. Even though it's listed as a downhill section, it's very rolly and it doesn't really feel like a net downhill, if that makes sense. It's just super slow going because you're almost guaranteed to hit that section at night, unless you're like really far out in the front, I guess. But it's super rocky, it's super bushwhacky. And when I say super bushwhacky, I don't mean it's like overgrown. Like there's thorn bushes all over that trail. My legs got pretty cut up on those sections. So just I don't know, be aware that it can get kind of rough down there and it's just going to be slow going. I can't speak for other people, but I just don't have the mental capacity to to be able to run like I can during the day on loose rock in the like at late at night after you've been running for what like 14, 15 hours already. So it definitely gets pretty difficult there, but make sure to just maintain your mental composure, keep eating. Most of your problems in races are because you didn't eat enough or you're not caffeinating enough at night to be alert and make the right decisions from there. But yeah, pretty rolly section, and then that kind of continues as you get to Geronimo at mile 80, to Donahue at mile 80, or Geronimo to Donahue. Yeah, sorry, 72 to 80. So it stays rolly until like the late 70s. And then after that, you start climbing up to Donahue, which is on top of the rim. Um, and so I mean that climb's pretty short. It feels like I think it's listed as it looks like it's longer climb on the vert chart than it really is. But I thought it was maybe like a half mile ish climb, and then you have another like there's a half mile that's actually steep, and then there's another maybe mile or so until you hit the aid station. I didn't think it was as technical as some of the other ascents or descents though, and then you just get spit out onto like a dirt road at mile uh like 80 or something, and then yeah, so that's that section. And then you do have some more difficult descending and then climbing to do after that, though, from mile like 80 to 89. So that's going to be from Donahue to Pine Trailhead. So that first descent is going to be relatively steep. And then it's also, I mean, just being blunt, like it's just another steep ascent. Luckily, it's the last one of the race. So I hit that last ascent right before sunrise. And yeah, not as technical going up either, but it's just yeah, make sure you have enough calories in you to be able to keep descending and climbing. At mile 85, there is another crew access point. My crew ended up there were 3 people in my crew, including my pacer, and the other 2 ended up pacing some of my other friends. So that mile 85 crew spot didn't really do much for me, but there's a lot of people over there. So if you have a crew, then definitely take advantage of that. It'll be good to see some friends about 15 miles or so from the finish line there. But yeah, one thing I just want to make a good recommendation here for people. So when you're preparing for a 100 miler, whether it's this one or another one, so many people want to think of, they want to visualize their stuff when they're training at the finish line. Or what is that finish line feeling going to be like? What am I going to do at the finish? Am I going to jump in the air? Am I going to do some pose? Like, what's it? They're just imagining what that's going to feel like. But what I always tell people, especially before a difficult mountain 100 like this, is you can't. I don't want to say you can't do that, but what you should be visualizing is not the finish line. You should be visualizing that moment when it's like 3 in the morning and you're tired and you're at mile 85 and you've got another climb that you need to do before you get to the finish line. And you got to be thinking to yourself, what am I going to tell myself in this moment that's going to get me through this really difficult section? And so when I'm imagining myself training for, when I was thinking of like visualizing my success at this race, I was thinking to myself, what am I going to do at mile 85 when I'm tired and it's still pitch black out and I need to get up a mountain? Um, and so that answer is going to be different for everybody. But for me, that's really what I look forward to in these races. And I hope it's what you guys look forward to too. I think that those are the times in our races, but also in our lives where we have the opportunity to overcome this very, I'd say, adversity in a controlled environment. And it's really great to see what your character, how are you going to respond? And I think that really tells us a lot about our character. It's really easy to be a good person. It's really easy to be a nice person when times are going well and when there's peace in your life. But how you respond to difficulty when you're not in the mood to experience it late in the race is a really great indicator of your character. And it's also a great opportunity for you to hone your character and see what motivates you and how you can respond better next time. So one of my biggest pieces of advice is when you're visualizing success, visualize you overcoming something difficult, not you strolling through the finish line. Let's see though. I'll get back to the race report. Hope you guys like that tidbit though. So mile 89 is going to be the last official aid station of the race. That's going to be Pine Trailhead to the finish line. There is a water jug at mile like 99, I believe it is. And yeah, I mean, overall, pretty fast section. I hit Sunrise maybe, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 miles before hitting the Pine Trailhead. So from the Cruise Zone to the Pine Trailhead, it's pretty flat roads, also very runnable. If you have some energy, I would definitely recommend trying to make up some time there. The last descent of the rim is, it's not too bad. I mean, when you have 89 miles under your legs, it's definitely not easy, but it's also not as bad as some of the descents that you hit earlier on in the race. And what's nice about that descent is once you're down it, you end up on very rolly single track trail. I actually love that single track trail, and I had a lot of energy left in the race still. And so I actually ended up passing 2 people on that rolly section, and ended up beating them by like 30 minutes and 40 minutes to take 7th place. And once again, not saying that to toot my own horn. I'm saying that because what that shows me, like what I can learn from that is, okay, we need to make sure that we have energy late in the race, because if you're beating people by 30 and 40 minutes with 8 miles to go in the race, that means that like saving 30 seconds per mile, like going from mile 0 to 20 is not as helpful as saving 5 minutes a mile from mile 90 to 100. I mean, you can do the math on that, but just making sure that you still have the energy to run late in the race is a lot more beneficial for your finish time, but also it just feels good. Like you feel like a badass when you can run it in at 100-miler. So if you're trying to race the course, I would definitely recommend leaving some energy in the tank. Even if you're not, I would recommend trying to save some energy for that section. Because I hit it in the morning, it was pretty cool out. But if you do hit that section on a hot day, especially if you're like a back of the packer, I know people who finished probably around noon or later on that second day had to deal with like 90+ degree heat. And because it's from mile 89 to the water jugs at mile 99, I mean, that's still 10 miles that could take you 2 or 3, possibly more hours if depending on what your condition is at the end of the race. So don't let your guard up. Make sure that you run smart. Make sure that you have the ability to carry more than just 1 liter of water with you. Then, usually we all have our 2 500 milliliter bottles in the front of our pack, but make sure you do have the ability to carry more if you think you're going to need it at this section in the race. And so, yeah, also remember the race is technically 101 miles. So, I mean, we paid for a 100-miler. You get a free mile out of it, I guess. But yeah, that's my race report. I had a really great time at this one. I learned a lot from my pacer. I'm going to get to that in a second. But I would just say my last notes for the race, if I were to give three pieces of advice before finishing this up, I would say make sure that you know how to navigate with a satellite-based app such as Gaia or Caltopo. I personally thought that the race was very well marked, but there are things like storms and heavy wind, even course vandalism or cows eating flags that can really easily make you miss a turn. And at a race like this, where sometimes it feels like you're almost making your own course because everything is so overgrown, but it's just you need to make sure that you're paying attention, and it's also a confidence boost to have something like Gaia at your disposal. And the race does have they do have a Caltopo map of the course that you can download on the website. Secondly, I would say make sure you bring the right gear with you. At this race, you can have very hot days, you can have very rainy days, and you can have very cold nights also. So make sure that you have the right gear, and make sure that you're also using things like dry bags or even like just a simple plastic bag to put all your clothes in for the race is helpful because, at least for me, when it was raining on me, I didn't put my rain gear on because it was still daytime, and I figured I would be able to dry off before it got cold out at night. But I had all my gear in my pack inside I just used a plastic bag for this race, put all my gear in there. So when I needed something, I knew it was going to be dry. So yeah, just a good piece of advice there. And then lastly, I do think this race is going to test your experience level. And that's not to say that a first-time ultra marathoner, somebody going for their first 100-mile belt buckle, that's not to say you can't do it here. But I would say that makes it all that more impressive if you can finish this one as your first. But I would say that your success at this distance and in this race in particular is going to revolve around your ability to make a lot of small decisions correctly that add up to the success of your finishing. I don't know. And when I think about my race here, I think that if I were to improve, I think the best way for me to improve would be to actually go to the bottom of the rim and run those sections at night. I mean, I live in Denver. I just don't have the ability to, I don't have the money and the time right now to go to Pine and practice on those trails. But if you want to do really well at Mogollon, then I would recommend going to Technical Trail at night and practice running on that as fast as you can. That'll really help you late in this race if you care about your time in particular. I think the only other way I could really do well here would be maybe shaving off some time at mile 53 aid station. I think was a little too long of a stop. I'm going to have to figure out. Maybe I could have eaten a little bit more on the move. But I definitely want to think about how I can be faster at that like aid station transition in particular. But also the biggest thing that I learned from my pacer was that run everything you can. One of the reasons that I had a good race at Mogollon was because my pacer kept forcing me to run every single, even if it was just 3 runnable steps. He'd be like, "Are you going to run here?" I'd be in the middle of telling him a story, and he'd be like, "Are you going to run here?" And he would just cut me off and say that, or something like that. And it just got to the point where I was tired of hearing him ask me if I was going to run. So I just started running every possible little thing that I could, 5 steps here, 5 steps there. And it all, I thought, added up pretty well. But I think that's all I got to really say about this race. It's a lot of fun. It's a really beautiful course. It's really rugged. It's really steep, really technical. If that sounds exciting to you, if a tough mountain 100 sounds exciting to you, that is a hard rock qualifier. I would definitely recommend giving this race a shot and throwing it on your calendar. And if you enjoyed this broadcast, this podcast, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope that you found the tips in here helpful. I hope that you found the race report helpful. There's really not a lot of info about this race and the current course up on social media and stuff right now. So yeah, I hope this is particularly helpful because of that. But if you want to see some video of the course, I do have a YouTube video up as well. It's pretty short. I think it's like 12 minutes long. And that'll, yeah, show you the course a little bit more too. If you do like my tips, please remember that I am a running coach. You can check out my website, journeyruncoaching.com, for more information, or you can email me at journeyrunningllc@gmail.com with any questions, comments, concerns about either this podcast episode, or if you're interested in some sort of coaching with me. I do have plans and more information about that on my website, which once again is journeyruncoaching.com. But yeah, lastly, please make sure to rate, subscribe, or comment on this video or podcast, wherever you're watching it or listening it. I'm kind of new to this whole thing of owning a business and having a podcast. So constructive criticism is always appreciated. I think that I'm going to try to invest in maybe a more like just a better camera, so that for those of you that are watching this on YouTube, it'll be a little bit better of an experience. But yeah, hopefully I'll have that for either the next episode or the one after that. But anyways, thank you all for listening to this episode. I really hope you enjoyed this Mogollon Monster race report episode. There's going to be more episodes like this to come. I've run a lot of races that just in the past that I think it would be fun to do a race report for too. Maybe that'll help more people if they happen to be running races that I have run in the past too. But anyways, thank you all for watching, and welcome to the Journey Running Podcast if this is your first time tuning in.